As we start video 3, we're going to be looking inside of a chloroplast, which we did in Unit 2, and you have some of this in your notes from Unit 2, but we're going to revisit it as the chloroplast is the main organelle that we're using to go through photosynthesis. So there are 3 things that I would like you to draw, and if you do not have this picture in your notes, you need to draw the picture of the chloroplast as well. So this is the chloroplast, and you also need to draw the 3 items that we're going to label inside of this. One of them is just an individual disc, and you can see that there are multiple individual discs. One disc is called a thylakoid. That's just for one disc. Now, you also notice that the discs are kind of stacked, and they come in different size stacks. That doesn't matter. But a stack of thylakoids, 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be, is called a granum. Granum, sometimes you'll hear it referred to as grana, and that's kind of singular versus plural, like geese and goose. You have grana and granum. And the last part that we want to label is this lighter yellowish region. Notice that it kind of surrounds all of the thylakoids and it helps hold them in place. So it sounds a little bit like cytoplasm, but because we're inside of the chloroplast, this is called stroma. So that's the liquidy material that surrounds all of our thylakoids. Now, if you don't have the picture finished, you need to pause the video and finish that. But if you do, we're going to go ahead and move on, and we have some definitions for some of these. So as I was talking and labeling, if you didn't catch what a thylakoid was, that's the sac-like membrane. That's the single sac-like membrane. And then grana is a stack of thylakoids. Now, also part of our chloroplast, and we didn't label this on our previous picture because it's not something that we could just see, we have these items in the chloroplast called photosystems. Now, when you think about a system like a solar system, it is multiple planets and moons and the sun, and they're kind of all working together and around each other. Well, a photosystem would be a group of items that all help and contribute with photosynthesis. So we have items like protein, so we have enzymes, chlorophyll, which is a pigment. We have other pigments that we know of that are inside of the cell. We don't just have chlorophyll, although that's the main one. So photosystems are multiple things that just work together in this whole process of photosynthesis. Now, if we take a look at the inside of the cell, okay, so we have the cytoplasm now. We're looking inside of the cell. We have, oh, sorry, I lied. This is a chloroplast. The cytoplasm is out here, so, surrounding it. You have 2 items really going on inside of your chloroplast. Your chloroplast has the thylakoids. You can see the green discs here, and then it has the stroma region. And so there are 2 different types of photosystem reactions. Okay, 2 different ones. If I say, what are the 2 parts of photosynthesis? That's what I'm referring to, are these reactions right here. The first reaction is called the light dependent. Light dependent means that it's going to require light. And this one is what takes place in the thylakoid membrane. So you can see in the picture it says light reactions. That's where your light reaction takes place. The second photosystem, or the second part to photosynthesis, is called light independent. Now, light dependent, light independent, if you're saying it quickly, sometimes it's hard to tell which one somebody said. That little IN makes a big difference. So a lot of the time scientists will refer to this one as the Calvin cycle, named after the scientist who discovered it. And the Calvin cycle is out in the stroma, so it's not in the thylakoid itself. So it takes place in the stroma, which we said was that area outside the thylakoids, the liquidy substance. So those are the 2. Those are really important. You need to know that the 2 parts in photosynthesis are the light dependent and then the Calvin cycle, or light independent. We'll come back to those and talk a little bit more about what happens in each one of those in just actually I think in the next video. So another important key to photosynthesis we said were these electrons. At the end of video 2, we said that the electrons will gain energy from the light and then they speed up and they can move energy levels. So these electron carriers are specifically designed to be able to pick up these high energy electrons. High energy electrons have a great deal of speed. They can move very quickly. They're very small. Electrons are really tiny. So they require a special carrier so that they can move about in the chloroplast or in the cell itself. And these are carrier molecules, again, that only pick up 2 electrons at a time. So they can carry a pair of electrons and they can transfer them somewhere else. The one that we're going to learn about in photosynthesis, and we'll have a different one when we get to cellular respiration in the next unit, this one's called NADP, and that's kind of like an abbreviation like ATP is, so we're not going to go into what that all stands for, but NADP with a positive. Notice that the positive is there, so that is telling you that right now it is not holding any energy electrons. It is not, it's an empty carrier. And sometimes you'll see NADP and then an H on the end, and what that means is the plus is gone, and with the H there, that means that it is currently holding its 2 electrons in a hydrogen. It can't pick up anymore. This energy molecule is kind of in use at the present moment, and it is in the process of carrying the electrons to some other molecule. I like to think of this like a taxi cab, because if you need to get around to somewhere, you may maybe at some point ride in a taxi. And a taxi can only hold so many people, and so when the taxi has filled up and it can't hold any more, it's going to take you and your luggage and your belongings to wherever you've asked it to take you. So it can pick up electrons and it can transfer you somewhere else. And in the process, along the way, if somebody else is hailing a taxi, it's not going to pull over and pick them up. It's already full. So that's kind of key. These energy carriers can't pick up more than the 2 electrons at a time, and so if there's other electrons that need picked up, you're going to need to find an empty carrier. An empty electron carrier. They can only hold 2 at a time. And there it goes. All right, we're going to go back to the light dependent and independent, so it was in this video. So we're back at the first stage, light dependent reaction. This is the one that we said happens in the thylakoids. It's called light dependent because it requires sunlight, and you can see from the picture light is absolutely has to be there. It also is going to use water and produce oxygen. So remember in our photosynthesis equation, we needed light, we need water, and we need carbon dioxide. And we can make oxygen and sugar. So in our equation, we've already used up our light, and we're using up our water. So those 2 things are being used up in the light-dependent reaction, and what we're making is the oxygen. So that must mean that in our next group of reactions, it's going to deal with carbon dioxide and sugar, because those are the only 2 things that we haven't talked about yet. So the light-dependent reaction, just a quick overview, requires light, it uses water, and it makes oxygen. It also is the reaction that is going to pick up our electrons. So you notice that the positive there is getting converted to the NADPH, so it's picking up the electrons. We also have ADP picking up a phosphate to become the ATP, so we have our half battery getting fully charged up and becoming at its maximum energy potential. The last, or the second, there's only 2, so we have the light dependent. Now this one, the Calvin cycle, is also called light independent, so sometimes you'll hear me say one, and the next day in class I'll call it the other one, so I want you to know what they mean. Light independent, or Calvin cycle, is going to come second. So the light dependent has to happen first, because in the Calvin cycle it's going to use the ATP and the electron carrier that were just made. The Calvin cycle can't happen first because there's no ATP yet or any filled up electron carrier. So Calvin cycle definitely happens second in our chain of events. And it's called light independent because it doesn't require sunlight. The plant can go through the Calvin cycle at nighttime when it's dark or during the day when it's light outside. That's not an issue. It doesn't matter. And I also said that it probably is going to be dealing with carbon dioxide and sugar because those are the only two items that were in our equation that we hadn't talked about. And so the Calvin cycle does use up carbon dioxide and it produces sugar molecules, the glucose. So now that we're gonna put these two together, okay, but here's our line. We saw this picture already, light, water, and we made oxygen. That is the light reactions. Notice they're green because that takes place in the thylakoids. Now the next one, the Calvin cycle, this one's taking place in the stroma, the liquidy material outside of the thylakoids. Notice carbon dioxide is going in, so carbon dioxide is getting used up. And in the process of the Calvin cycle, this is where the plant makes its food. The actual food production, the sugar production, happens right there in the Calvin cycle.